Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Kevin, aka Gospel Gambit, back for a second video of the day today. We just finished up recording a quick 9-move win with the Scotch Gambit. Go take a look at that one. We also have a previous Scotch Gambit video. It's our second video here on the channel. If you'd like a more in-depth view on the theory of that Scotch Gambit. Today we're going to be looking at one of my favorite openings from the white side of the pieces. We're going to be playing versus the Scandinavian Defense. And we're going to be getting the queen to a5 variation from black, allowing us to play the Leonhardt Gambit from the white side of the pieces. It's a gambit that's dear to my heart. I first saw it from international master Mark Esserman, whose book I have right behind me here, Mayhem and the Mora, which is pretty much the Bible on the Smith-Morra Gambit. We're going to get some of those games here on the channel as well, and we're going to take a dive into his book that is rich in flavor when it comes to attacking chess and how to play that opening. Now, as we dive into this opening today, we're going to see what a gambit slash opening that doesn't get played often, how that can confuse or make the opponent slip up. After the moves e4, d5, of course we're just going to take the pawn, as you should as white when offered. And black has a few different options. Black can take back with the queen, which we get today, and black can take ignore the pawn and play knight to f6, trying to recapture the pawn at a later date. On variations with knight f6, I usually just like to give the pawn back, playing moves like d4, knight f3, bishop out to e2 or d3, and get castled as quickly as possible. Usually if we try to hold on to the pawn, games can get very complicated, and I usually don't want to do a lot of studying on the Scandinavian defense as a whole. I have a few different kind of pet lines, like this Leonhardt Gambit, which I enjoy. So I try to keep things simple and put most of my focus on openings like the Scotch Gambit, Evans Gambit, as well as my Caro Kann and things like that from the black side. So as we can see, black takes back with the queen right away. And of course, we're going to play knight to c3, developing with tempo onto black's queen. And if we take a look at the Lichess database, black moves the queen back to his starting spot about 33% of the time, and about the same amount of time he or she plays queen to a5, which is normally what I'm hoping for from the white side of the pieces, as it leads to the Leonhardt Gambit. Another move, black can play queen to e6, but after just the simple bishop to e2, we're going to have no problems with getting castled here quickly. You're going to see your knight out to f3, castled, and black's blocking their own development here of their own pieces. So in this game, we do get queen to a3, and that leads us to the Leonhardt Gambit, which is the immediate b5. Now, when I first saw this move on Mark's stream, I normally watch him for his Smith-Morra games, and obviously he's gambiteering pawns all the time with that opening. And when I first saw this, it looked crazy to me, right? You're giving away pretty much a free pawn is what I thought, just to make the queen move again. But obviously we have to dig a little bit deeper to understand the meaning behind this move. As you can see from the evaluation, it's pretty much an even game. Even giving away a full pawn here is white. And after black takes the pawn, which they do in over close to 75% of games. So you are going to see them take this pawn and dive into lines of the Leonhardt Gambit. Well, after they take the pawn, what does this do? Now, all of a sudden, we have a half-open B file to work with. And what piece loves files? Well, our rook on A1 is going to love this file. What's the point of bringing our rook over to B1, which is what we do immediately if they take the pawn? Well, the point is we're putting big pressure here on the B7 pawn, and black is going to have to either keep this bishop back on C8 to babysit this pawn, or he's going to have to somehow either push B6, and that just kind of looks ugly from the queen side of the pieces, as well as the rook is hitting the queen right away. So not only did black move the queen once, twice, 3 times, they're going to have to move their queen a 4th time, and we've already developed 2 pieces on our side of the board, and we will eventually have other pieces flooding the board ourselves. And lastly, the big overarching picture here is that our rook is either going to come to b3 or b5 at some point in the game. This game, it does happen. We'll kind of see one example. But the whole idea is that from these squares, we can easily slide our rook over to the king side of the board. Now, why is that important? Well, we're bringing a rook all the way from the queen side to the king side to give us an extra piece if black does end up castling king side. So we're going to have both of our rooks on the king side of the board. Our queen's going to be able to get out there. And normally we're going to have our knights and our bishops aimed at black's king. So it just brings more firepower to the attack that white can bring towards black's king, as well as making black's queen feel uncomfortable and their pawn on b7 feel uncomfortable. Black has a few different options. If you kind of count their squares as where their queen can move, well, anywhere along the a file besides a5 is already taken by our pieces. Nowhere on the b file is safe for their queen. And this move queen to e4 is covered by our knight. So that really kind of just leaves these dark squares for black's queen to escape to and to be safe in this game. And all three of those squares are what the computer suggests that black should do, and it keeps about an even evaluation. After this game of queen to a5, I should have played the immediate move, rook to b5, but kind of forgot about that, and I just went with the immediate knight f3, which isn't a terrible move. As you can see, maybe loses that half a point of computer evaluation. It's a natural looking development move, and it gives black the opportunity to make a mistake. And most Scandinavian players, they love this move, bishop to g4. What did we just discuss? Well, our rook is staring down at b7, and in 90 to 95% of their games, black does not have to be worried about this pawn on b7. A lot of the times, it's usually the pawn on c7, which we're trying to put pressure on as white. And in this game, black just blunders right away with bishop to g4. As you can see, we've already given a pawn to black, and we capture one back right away, and it's already given us a +1 evaluation. Now, if black's not careful, and they were not careful in this game, they have to look and see that their queen is almost trapped. Like we just said, this dark square is the only safe space on the a file for their queen. And if given the opportunity, if black, let's say, ignores and plays a move like knight f6, or in this game e6, well, we have the opportunity to track down black's queen and trap them with the rook b5. So that move that we talked about earlier in the game. Black cannot play anywhere along the b file due to our rook. Our knight is covering a4, our bishop's covering a3, and our other bishop is covering a6. As you would think, well, you can just play bishop or queen to a6, but after the move, rook takes b8 with check, we are just going to pick up the queen right away. And in fact, the computer does suggest either bringing the queen back, so at least they get a rook for their trouble, or taking right away and dropping the queen. So our opponent just resigned after the move rook to b5. They probably could have tried to just trade right away. We're putting pressure here on the c7 square. Black is probably going to have to develop, and their whole structure is going to be a complete mess. And we are already close to +6 just out of the first 8 moves in the opening. So a pretty fun opening to play, one that's not seen too often by black when they're playing this Scandinavian Defense Queen A5 variation. I do have another game that will be up on the channel at some point this week that dives into some deeper game, and it goes a little bit further than just 8 moves. But hopefully this was a good just introduction to the opening. Test it out in your games, kind of pull it up on the board opener, and just kind of play around with different moves. We have ideas of rook to b3 and even getting our bishop out to a3 early, contesting this dark square file from black, especially if their queen does end up on one of these 2 squares instead of a5. after our rook comes out. So kind of play around with it yourself. We're going to have more YouTube videos looking at this opening in the future. And if you like this video and like the other videos here on the channel, please subscribe. It's a big help to me. And if you'd like to be a part of a bigger community, join us on Skool.com. That's SKOOL.com. And look for Gospel Gambit Chess. On there, you're going to find like-minded people at the club level playing, just trying to improve their game and learn every day. Hopefully you guys have a good one, and we'll see you next time.